name is Jessica Lloyd. I'm Training Education Manager here, so I run the space, and I have the honor of planning all these great events for you guys. I just want to say thank you from all of the Acuity staff for taking time out of your busy lives. You know, we have family, your occupations that take a lot of time, so we really, really appreciate it for you guys coming out and spending a couple days with us. I hope you guys get a chance to enjoy New York City a bit too. It's my honor tonight to introduce our speaker, Rosalyn Cama. Cama, I'm sorry. Rosalyn Cama. So let me tell you a little bit about her first. Rosalyn Cama is the president and principal interior designer of the Evidencebased planning and design firm Cama Incorporated in New Haven, Connecticut. She is a past president of the American Society of Interior Designs and currently serves as chair of the board for the Center for Health Design. Rosalyn has authored evidence-based healthcare design and frequently writes and lectures on the topic. Healthcare Design magazine has recognized her as one of the 25 most influential people in healthcare design and is a recipient of the ASID Designer Distinction Award. Currently, Rosalyn is involved in early conversations around the development of the International Institute of Biophilic Design. Would you all help me in welcoming Rosalyn?
So I'm sorry I broke the party. You were all having such a good time. But so let me not be a talking head. Let's make this a conversation. So I know many of you came up from Texas, thank you, and Oklahoma. So let me first ask, how many of you are not from Texas and Oklahoma? And so we in the back of the room, those are the Northeasterners. Give them 4. I won't cause bodily harm. How many of you are focus your lives around lighting engineering, lighting design, product, and the rest, architects, designers, what am I missing? Any healthcare providers, administrators, clinicians? Okay, so I am an interior designer, so I will stand here and talk about lighting from my perspective, but using this evidence-based knowledge. And as I go through this presentation, know at the end, and we're going to give them the slides afterwards, yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. So there are citations. So for every bit of research or comment that I make, hopefully I'm backed by someone with a PhD after their name with a little bit more than just a good guess. But there's some pretty pictures that I have good guesses about. So the title of the presentation is Innovative Lighting Solutions for a Modern Healthcare Facility. And when we first talked about this title, I said, all right, that's, I got to get my head around this. So back when I first started doing this with Acuity, we had a major snowfall. Some of you may have remembered earlier this year called the Nemo. 3 feet of snow dropped in Connecticut, just up Long Island Sound from here. And after we could sort of dig our way out of our driveway, I lived near the water, which is a lovely place to live because the wind off the water blows the clouds away. We have sunny, sparkly, sunny winter days. And so what you see here is, what you don't see here is the ceiling is blocking into the sun, reflecting off of snow and water. And so this magical single light source provides beautiful entertainment. I'm intrigued right now as we're all mourning the loss of the long days of summer, and light quality is changing. And I don't think, maybe we feel it more in the spring as it starts to wake us up earlier and earlier in the morning, but this time of year I think you begin to feel the day shortening, the angle of the sun is changing, the shadow lines are different. And so this idea that, preaching to the choir here, but the sun is a pretty magical light source. And I think a remarkable piece of inspiration. When we think about innovation, how much more innovative can, any light source get but to reflect off of another object and create a different quality of light. So during a full moon, same view, same site. Again, working with reflection off of interesting materials. I think sometimes we forget about that concept of the way lighting works when we start to develop lighting patterns for our interiors. And the word is healthcare, but I think the thing that I want you to sort of framework, I want you to put yourself into today is the framework of health. Health means different things for different people. And so, somewhere in your teens or your 20s, health means one thing, and then as you age, there's always something that's creaking or hurting or whatever. And when there's a balance of health, and then illness or trauma or injury occurs, and health gets put out of balance. And that's the world we live in as healthcare designers. And it's not one size fits all, but there is an impact to the way the built environment is designed. And lighting is a very, very important piece of that vocabulary that we work with. And so this idea that the sun, although wonderful and beautiful if you're out there on a hot sunny day, is scorching, and so we look for cover. We don't spend enough time paying attention to this idea of what I call dappled light. When clouds sort of dance across the sky, or when light comes through a canopy of trees, and the wind blows and patterns are changing. I think this carpet pattern is very interesting because I think that's what it's doing. It's playing with the idea that shadow would fall from a light source through a canopy of trees, and you would get this pattern. We don't think about that as a possibility in the way we design our lighting facilities. And so the word modern, to me, is a relatively sort of an interesting term, relatively speaking, to us as a species. We haven't been indoors for that long of a period of time, and yet in such a short period of time, we spend most of our time indoors. So this idea of designing lighting for a human experience that is indoors. When we've evolved, some of us were talking about, our genetic evolution and, where and how that all happened. It happened because of the environment. And yet now we're all indoors, and do we think about that in a modern sort of way? Facility. So this is one of my favorite interiors. It's just up the road. Please come to New Haven next time. You're in New York. It's just an hour and a half train ride. We have a remarkable university, Yale University. This is the Beinecke Rare Books Library. Beinecke, Mr. Beinecke, for those of you old enough to remember, of S&H Green Stamp fame, donated, money to have this facility built. The architect was Gordon Munshaft of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. And what I love about this building was this understanding that these are old, rare books. And old, rare books have to be preserved. One might say like an old, rare human being. And that they have a propensity to disintegrate with daylight. So what Gordon Munshaft did was made a case for building this hermetically sealed glass tower where the books are stored and temperature is controlled, but wanted them to be seen, not to be prohibitively held back in the wall, but then couldn't let natural daylight come in. They wanted to use onyx, but then deferred to Vermont marble. And so these exterior walls are made up of large panels of Vermont marble, and to go into that building on a sunny day is one of the most healing spaces I have ever been in. What you can sort of get a glimpse of is that they've done courtyards around the outside of the perimeter of this building, and staff work down below, which allowed natural daylight to come in, because as human beings, need to be preserved. Indoors is protection enough. And so natural daylight comes into the work environment. So this idea of facility being a demeaning term sort of gets turned on its ear when you look at a facility like this for rare books. And why aren't we asking the same question for the design of facilities for humans? The last piece of this is solutions. And when I think about where we've come over the last 10 years to change the conversation around how the design of the built environment impacts health, the only way we've ever made any traction in design is to tie it to an outcome. And then if you tie the outcome to a better return on investment, you sort of get to the C-suite and you can sort of talk your way through the appropriate design intervention. And when you can't do that, the conversation stops. And everyone who starts on a project well knows that all your clients want, best in class. And it tends to get dumbed down as you go along. You've got to hold them to these conversations. So that's where I'm going to take you for the next few minutes. So you can stop me, interrupt me, ask questions, and let me just talk to you. But I'd like to refer to these spaces as places of well-being. Healthcare spaces, but at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on, if you're living, so many people live with cancer today, so their state of well-being is a little different, but they live and they function, and they need certain things that maybe are a little different than you and I sort of, living in a different state. I don't know, being presumptuous, and probably someone in our group here who's managing a chronic illness, but we still function. And so what kinds of environments make that difference? And more importantly, to this point here, how does light influence that healing? Both natural and electric light, and where are the synergies? So, because my world is evidence-based, I have to always ask, is there enough data? And when Acuity asked me to come to the table to talk about this topic, they thought, I don't really know. So one of the first things we did was we scoured the literature and looked to see if we could make a case. And so what we've done is use this methodology of design. How many of you are familiar with evidence-based design? Any EDAC certified? We'll talk to you later. Jessica might even have some paperwork about that. But it's this idea of not dumbing down design, but sort of changing the conversation so that as you have a client present an issue, you can ask the question around, well then, what can I do to improve that outcome? And I may not know everything about it, but more than likely there are people out there in academia who have done some research and help you to bolster the conversation. And it also helps to sort of buoy up design decisions to at least a baseline. You don't have to argue the same thing over and over and over again. We got the single-bedded rooms to stop the spread of infection. You don't have to re-argue that point anymore. It's been proven. And where will you go with that is really the liberation that I think this methodology gives us. So how do we innovate from there? Part of it is you have to own the conversation. You have to be well versed. And I've been playing in this world for about 15 years now, so it's easy to sort of build on it. If you're just coming into it, it's not that hard if you sort of organize it in topics. And studying for the EDAC exam helps to organize it. This idea of not just having clients tell you yes or no because they're only looking in one of these spheres of intelligence. So, at the top of the list is who they are as an organization and what their strategy is to move the organization forward. Some of them have deep, user polls, staff polls, but they also have customers. This whole idea about customer satisfaction, patient, staff reporting is going to make all the difference in the world, and how we hitch our wagon to that conversation is what makes us successful. There are plenty of thought leaders. You don't need to know it all. I mean, we got a whole room full of them here from Acuity who can answer the questions on lighting. I feel liberated from not having to own all these topics. And then you go into the research, because once you gather all this other information, then you sort of have a sense of what it is you're trying to find out about, and it's then that you start looking at, what are ways that we can improve that through design, or we can push the industry, or we can sit, with our friends who are manufacturers and ask the hard questions and not just take for granted the way it's always been. You boil all that together, and that's, each project's a little different. I call it project wisdom. It's from there that you pull out of that a vision, and we know that the great projects, not the good projects, are the ones where there is someone at a very high level who holds you to that vision. Steve Jobs is an excellent example of someone who was very principled in a very clear vision, and you move the needle, put it down to the universe, as you put it, but that's how that happens. And I count on one hand the number of great clients I've had who've been able to pull this off. A lot of really good clients, a lot of really good projects out there. The ones, the Meineke Rare Book libraries of the world are rare. And I sort of feel in an evidence-based way that this process was managed through that project. The other thing that I think is important to understand is where people come into conversations. And some are innovators, and some aren't ever going to be innovators, and nor should they be. And so this is a very famous curve of where and how, people who think about things, change things, invent things, design things, sort of fall on that scale. And very few come in as innovators. They're likely to fail, and they're putting themselves out there. Right behind them will come the early adopters, early majority. Right at the top of that peak is when something becomes a commodity. Now everybody has to have it. It's not novel anymore. And then there are those, and we all know who they are, that come in way too late. So at the bottom of this, I put the big conversations that are going on in healthcare around design. So if you're just coming to the table trying to figure out how to make a hospital safe, that conversation's been around for 15 years. There's a lot of data around that. We should be innovating off the charts there. This efficient, effective was really so the Institute of Medicine drove the safety conversation. Efficient, effective was when health reform came to the table and said, we're going to have less money, we're going to have to do more. We've got to look at our workforce, we're going to pay attention to lead processing and begin to shift things around. We started decentralizing and deconstructing work areas. Now that we are into this accountable care model, the trick is going to be to keep people healthy. And a lot of the motivation to change the healthcare model that exists is around the ability to let patients have a say in their care. And so as they do that, it's going to be customer-centric. I call it human-centric here, because at the end of the day, we've got to look at populations, and that's the way needles will get moved. And if we go way out, and Jessica mentioned biophilic design, there's this whole group of folks who are out there starting to talk about how we keep our species from dying out. And so a lot of it is health-related issues over a longer period of time, and beginning to understand the kinds of environments as our populations grow immensely and move inward towards more urban environments, what responsibilities we'll have as designers. So that begins to set this up. And, at the end of the day, our responsibility is to convince the client, right? To be able to help them make decisions. So I learned from a professor at the University of Illinois how to sort of do these little scenario tests on where you'll make a difference. And so he's talking about creating these two axes and putting up opposing thoughts and then figuring out what it is you're trying to solve. So I was trying to solve which clients need which services, and what is it that makes them that enlightened client that creates the great project. And so across the horizontal axis, and I sort of flipped it around than you would normally think because of the Rogers curve, But at a minimum, if you're evidence-based in your thinking, you're gonna hold them to baseline knowledge. You're not gonna let them slip below that. If not, let them go, go to a catalog and buy what you need to buy. Put it together yourself. You don't need a professional to do that. But how far out on this innovation line are you willing to push your thinking and your project? And when money was bountiful and there was a lot of building going on, everyone was going to be the innovator, world class. And now that money's a little tight, it's going to be a lot of renovation work. It's probably at minimum we're going to have to work harder to hold them to baseline. But at the end of the day, where's the go, no-go decision? And we all joke about value engineering. Well, value is dollars. And you throw the baby out with the bathwater because it's about how much money am I going to save, and how many square feet of that, how many fixtures, how many. There's a lot there. Let's just dumb that down. It's light anyway. What's the difference, right? Or are you going to hold them to the top of that project wisdom chart and your beliefs, strategies that they've set to be best class? And if you can get them up the scale on values, help them innovate, you get to the place where we love to play, right? But if not, it's not wrong to be in the opposite quadrant. They just need a set of specifications. We know the answers to those things. Let's not spin our wheels. Let's just move on and then find the folks who will let you go out here, but then make them measure so we can get to see, fail fast, what's working, what's not working. So I'm going to take now and show you some of the examples, and I'm sort of organized around patient areas and staff areas, and then because it's got to be driven by an outcome, I've sort of divided the outcomes, and we'll sort of move sequentially from pain management to sleep, to depression, to the length of stay, because the is going to get linked to a business case, to the very little information that we know about how staff members communicate with themselves, with families, with patients, and then to where everyone is really looking right now, to satisfaction models. So when we look at pain management, we know light plays a remarkable role, but we don't spend enough time thinking about populations that struggle with pain. This is Texas. This is the emergency department in El Paso, Texas, the Children's Hospital of Rendering. And this idea that sunlight increases serotonin, which becomes a neurotransmitter that inhibits pain pathways. So you begin to notice that if you design a certain way, people require fewer pain medication, fewer pain meds. And if they require fewer pain meds, chances are there's an economic solution to that. That's why we in the Northeast, everybody's now starting to shop for where they're going January, February, and March. It's awful up here. We need sunlight, so we head to the Caribbean. But for those of you who are in planning, when you site buildings and you think about one side of a building, not the other, I think you do a better job in the south of it because sun is so intense. But this idea that are you putting the same lighting in the space for the sunny side of the building versus the shady side of the building, and the morning side versus the afternoon side? And do you understand the consequences for doing that? And who makes the decision as to which patient goes on which side of the building? Does it matter? No, because nobody talks about it. But if you talk about it, what you begin to understand that sometimes a certain side of the building can have as much as 40%, 46% greater sunlight intensity, and you go back and look at these studies. And what that means is they will use 22% less pain medication. And if they say, I don't have enough money to have you designing different lighting schemes, you say, but it'll be a 21% reduction in medication costs. How much money do you spend on medication? They know the answer to the question. So you see how getting them to baseline knowledge allows you to innovate and think a little differently about how lighting can be specified, not in a generic way. It's not the stuff that shows up on the value engineering table and gets cut. It becomes part of a very important conversation. There was a landmark study done here just outside of Philadelphia, a hospital in 1984. Roger Ulrich, good old Texas boy, now we're in Sweden. But she came from Texas, but Texas A&M professor who owns this topic. And he looked at a group of post-surgical patients, all pretty similar. Half of them had a view out the window to a grove of trees, the other half out to a brick wall. The folks who had the view of the trees went home a day earlier, and they used half as many pain medications. And so you begin to see that this study has been repeated. It was also followed up with, so if you don't have the window, put a work of art in. It worked the same way. So there's this psychological and physiological thing that's tied to this long view of nature. And it brings us back to who we are as human beings. We'd like to, it's when you're ball in the back, you're afraid of being a predator, right? You protect yourself and you can see the sailboat coming. You get ready, right? And so similarly, we've learned in healthcare facilities to use these long views. Henry Donkey, a physician in Missouri, many of you know now with LED lighting, we can light walls, we can create like moths to flame, these incredible, beautiful destinations, improve wayfinding. But also, there's another emergency department up at Yale. You begin to sort of take the edge off this experience that a patient thinks they're going to have. Bedroom in El Paso, this idea of big sky and stars, and so we worked with nurture and created a light fixture for above a standard piece of furniture that created distraction. And all you have to do is take someone out of their moment just for a second, and they'll go to a happier place. And if you can do that, then you start to change the way they think about pain. And Philips certainly has done this with the lighting designs that they incorporate into their equipment, medical equipment, and diagnostic equipment. And I find it interesting sometimes to just look at light in nature and think about what it does. I mean, one could spend a long time sitting on the banks of this river and looking at the tree or the reflection of the tree. Probably what's most intriguing is this reflection of the tree. And where does that take you? It takes you out of your moment. And so, where and how we create these cycles and change our way of thinking. Neonates have a very strong way to respond to anything that interrupts their senses. And so if we look at how infants progress, and we look at how things work when you give them cycled lighting versus constant lighting, we begin to see that there are greater weight gain, they feed orally sooner, there are fewer days on a ventilator, and they are motor coordination to begin to develop faster. So this understanding that lighting plays a role not only in health but in development becomes a very important part of the conversation. And can you have that conversation when you're designing these facilities? So I think you're going to see tomorrow some wonderful new product. And the idea that there are lighting fixtures now that will cycle light will begin, probably a bit costly to begin with, but will become much more available. And when and how will you use it? It's not just a decorative novelty, it has a connection to health. And so I think it's important for you to understand that it's important and keep asking more about it. And then you send the signal on to folks like Acuity, and you begin to get, it's kind of cool, and maybe we should put more hours towards it. Maybe we need to figure out how to make it more of a standard staple in the kind of work we're doing. Similarly, light changes. And so that sun, sort of early morning to the sun setting late day, that's Sky at Night Sailors delight with that phrase, but it begins to tell you that light has a different way of coming into your environment, and it has an intensity, and it has an angle and a brilliance, and yet we forget sometimes that our buildings should probably do the same. And although as it gets darker, they become beacons in neighborhoods, we sometimes, forget that there are people who need sleep in them. And so how we begin to modulate light inside a building to match that circadian rhythm, to look at what the sun's doing and why it's doing it, and how do we do that indoors becomes an important part of improving sleep quality. There's a lot of discussion about sleep quality, which is general health these days, but in healthcare it becomes an even more important topic. And so, this also this gradation or variation between if you dim the lights down in the room, then you walk into a very bright corridor, has its issues. And so I go back to this dappled light effect, and is there a way to sort of move people through it? Karen and I were talking about standards. There needs to be a better understanding about, where and how and why and where tests are occurring, but where health is occurring, and how do we handle those kinds of light levels. So, again, you'll learn about Rebel, these little LED, little light pods, and so you can create pattern and you can change, the way you create these little intense pieces of light. But, again, it's sort of a fun, novel piece right now. Where can we go with this? The vocabulary exists. I think we are smart enough to understand what has to happen. How do we ask the right questions and then push our good friends here at Acuity? And same with night shift workers. They need more money, and they need to change that body clock to be efficient and effective at a time when the rest of the population around them needs to sleep. Now, I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of work to break down the efficiency of their work environments. But how do you light these spaces so, it doesn't mean the whole corridor is on? And there are lighting levels, and I think the energy conversation played more of a role in changing that than the health conversation. So how can we contribute to that health conversation by looking at some of this? So at night, I love full moon nights. It's just a very magical time. One could say it disturbs your sleep, but I think that there are things that we can learn if we keep looking out the window and see what lighting is doing outside. There's some wonderful innovations that come out of these projects. Sometimes they stick and sometimes they don't. This was the Princeton University Medical Center in Princeton, field study research project known as the Pebble, where an awful lot of work was done to understand how and when and where patients fall. And as a result of that, the bathroom, these single-bedded rooms, moved to the head wall. And to get out of bed and sort of get your way, handrails started to appear. So this team looked at the idea that if you touch a handrail, the light come on and just like the floor doesn't have to be on all the time, but on touch. It signals the on-off switch. And so innovation, it may be a silly question and you don't even know, but that's why we're here. We're here to know that we have friends who we can ask the question, who will go to their research and development folks and start to think a little differently about how to solve a problem. Sometimes they're silly questions, but sometimes they're worth asking. And sometimes you also have to understand that, this world, or at least this conversation about how more holistic or Eastern medicine is sort of coming across to our more advanced Western ways, this idea of depression and how narcotics have primarily been a way to solve that. But when looked at how light treatment impacts depression, you can solve an effective onset in about half the time than you can with narcotics. So, you put that in your kit of parts to change your conversation. And there are studies to look at about not only psychiatric patients, but elderly patients doing so much better in their outcome if they're on the side of the building that has morning sun. And yet, I'm not sure that sort of assign patients to locations pay that much attention. And so it becomes important. This idea that light can be entertaining, and this is a winter sky in Connecticut, and you don't want to be outside, but it is fun to look out at that. But we do know that in cold climates, and this is a shot in Ohio, we sort of played with the backdrop here. It's very gray. There's just no direct sunlight for most of the winter. And yet this building made a point to put a lot of window space in to bring daylight in as often as possible. It had a direct impact on the psyche of patients, but they find that most hospitals will have to seek a longer length of stay for patients in northern climates. And when you get to warmer climates, they tend to sort of rotate over faster. So, that sunlight and daylighting, and what you'll find is these things tend to come from countries and locations that don't have good light quality. So the first studies when we were working out this Ohio project came from Norway and Canada. And one of these great clients said, I'm going to put myself out there, but I'm going to come back with some statistics so that when we're done, we'll know how much money it costs to sort of increase the perimeter of the building. 13 corridors got dropped in at the end of every corridor was a window, and at the end of the day, could justify it. And it wasn't that much. It was the same when we started the conversation about the single bedded room. Everyone thought, oh, can you go there? It's got to be outrageous. It was like $3,000. But the return on the investment, in a year and a half, it paid itself back. And the building had a 40-year life cycle expectancy. Do the math. It becomes a no-brainer. So, Canadian hospital dealing with depression started to see a 2.5-day reduction in length of stay. An Italian hospital looking at both bipolar depression, looking at east-facing versus west-facing rooms, saw almost a 4-day reduction in stay. And then this one I find very interesting. So this is another Canadian hospital looking at a cardiac intensive care unit and looked at mortality rates. So who knew if you had a heart attack, you had checked into the sunny side of the hospital. That's very useful information. Lighting also impacts communications, and there's not a lot of data around how to improve communications in healthcare. And yet, for you senior doctors, even on an annual basis, it's like you get fewer and fewer minutes, and by the time doctors left the room, you're like, oh, I forgot to ask that question. And so bright lights tend to stymie people, and softer lighting during the interview phase of the project, especially now with iPads between you and your clinician, starts to change the dynamics of it. So it becomes important. I love, there's this phenomena that I live west of my house. And when we have cloudy days, there's a point about the time that you're going home this time of year, that the sun sort of goes beyond the cloud line and then breaks across under the cloud line and shines, and everything sort of gets brighter. So the greens are brighter. Sometimes in winter, the gray has so much color between the gray pavement, the gray trees, and the gray sky. But there's this incredible quality of light. And I think we're sort of stuck with light has to come from the ceiling. So what happens when you raise light in through a space and pull it in? And it's not just daylight, but what happens if you bring electric light in through? And so to begin to think about the opportunities now to light not always, especially rolling patients down a corridor on their back, that's the last place you want the light. Perception of care, that In most doctor's offices, you walk from a corridor into a waiting room, and the staff are on the window side of the building, and then you sit for a good part of an hour, if you're lucky, in the windowless space. That Frank Becker up at Cornell here came into New York City and looked at a series of waiting rooms and concluded that if the space was designed appropriately, looked like it cared about you as a customer, that the perception of wait times went down. But the most important thing was the perception of care went up. And so right now, that matters most. We should get through this. So this idea of bringing daylight into waiting spaces. Daylighting is also a very good wayfinding tool in facilities. And so if you can't have a window, and it's not often that you can, this idea that you could light a spectacular work of art, or you could think about a landmark that you're moving to and use electric light to begin to sort of create the point that this is a more important space. And the interesting thing is that there was a study done up in Michigan, a 604-bed hospital, and they started just observing who got interrupted to see where and how directions were given, and they sort of tallied up each person, staff member, how many hours it was taking them. And in a year, it was costing this 600-bed hospital almost $250,000 to stop people find their way. And you got to like these places. It's not just putting a sign up. Inevitably, the sign has deeper signs taped to it because it's not clear. Just got a bouquet of flowers to get to the women's oncology unit. They wanted to put a sign on this wall. I thought that would be a beautiful painting. So, anybody watching America's Cup? No sailors in the crowd here? No sail in Texas? And they're catamarans. We love that. We sail catamarans and fly out and sound. Well, last weekend, they got pretty foggy on the bay. And so they were getting close to calling the race. There's something about fog on the water, it just neutralizes everything. It looks like a hospital most days, right? It's just all the same, right? Just evenly lit, no differentiation. That's why people are lost all the time. So, how do we begin to change that? And I come back to this because I can't get over how much money it costs not only to develop, these graphic images with light and projection, but how different institutions have managed to invest in them because they understand that this level of distraction can create sort of this change in environment will settle someone down, and running someone through an MRI costs a lot of money when you start misstepping. And people back up and they run these machines 24/7 now because they can't seem to get the flow right. And so reduce the stress and folks will go through the procedure a whole lot easier. And so light can influence performance, or what we call in healthcare work, the flow, how the whole system will flow through an institution. So I come to this dappled light grass. I shot this out in my yard one day. I just, when I asked a little kid what color is the grass, it's not just one shade of green. I got that and 50 shades of gray came out because I was like, 8 shades of green. So it had such a pleasant connotation. I had a neurological patient in Georgia who I do this exercise with user groups and ask them what creates sort of calm in their life. And most patients are outdoors, but this gentleman had suffered from a stroke. And he said, I sit in my living room and I look out the window, and I said, well, what are you looking at? He said, I'm looking out at the trees and the grass. And I said, what do you see? And he said, I see 8 shades of green, and I just got to hug him. He sees dappled light. And so I want fixtures that do that. That's what I want. That's my request to Acuity. So just a couple more slides. You're being very quiet. If I had too much wine or I put you to sleep, but staff supportive, big things, medical error, that keep staff from, being human, and stress and satisfaction levels. They work hard. So this idea about bright light, medication dispersions, where most errors will occur. And there were, again, this idea that we could light objects, that we could bring daylight, into spaces, begins to change some of that conversation. Laboratory work needs more even lighting, which you can see in the slide. It's wonderful daylight here, but very different kinds of environments with different lighting cues for very specific visual task-oriented work. And there are standards, we know where and how to follow them, and so that there are worse fixtures that do that. I love that the sustainability movement looked at how we harvest daylight and bring it in this case. We can bring it down to folks oftentimes in pharmacy and radiology departments where they just don't have daylight at all during the day. What a miserable way to work, but that's how they do. Because buildings have gotten so large and most of the glass area has gone to patients. This is back to this Ohio project where we dropped these courtyards in. A woman who was the CEO happened to be a nurse. She said, I want staff areas that touch windowed spaces. It will make such a difference. And so studies have shown that if you give staff an opportunity to be within at least 3 hours of daylight a day, you'll retain them or recruit them. So it correlates out job satisfaction. The cost to turn over a nurse is about $62,000. How much daylight or electric light, appropriate electric light, you can buy with that. And at the end of the day, we all go out and seek something in nature. I found these 2 nuns that look like they might be nursing nuns out at the beach. And so I think it's just a fitting close. So can electric light, can they mimic the healing properties of natural light? And I say yes, but it's up to you. It's sort of, we as interior designers, we tend to write narratives and then watch the interpretation and then lose it. The value engineering, you have to fight for it. But if you can present it this way, you stand a chance to hold on to this conversation. So you'll get these slides, some resources. This is the book that I wrote. If you're interested in the evidence-based design methodology, it's sort of a quick way to sort of help you begin to shift over how you do the work you do. I introduce you to the Center for Health Design, healthdesign.org. A knowledge repository is building. We have databases that can give you a fair amount of this information. Field study research project, Pebble project. How many of you worked on Pebble projects? Yeah, a few. Built environment network. We're trying to bring the facilities folks into the conversation because they are our clients for the most part. And so trying to build, at least with the large systems as a start, to have them put their shoes on the table and enlighten them through these kinds of conversations.
Can I go back to 2 seconds?
Sure.
So we've talked to some facilities about that, and I don't know what you've run into, but for us, there's some hesitation because they don't want to put out their negative things necessarily.
Well,
and so how do you talk, how is it,
Yeah, so, there are 2 different kinds of people that I could have spent my career hiding my work like a teacher in school. What I'm doing. It's a secret till it's unveiled, or you could put it out there and be challenged and get to a better place faster. And so we're a relatively small community in healthcare design. I find, and I think the center has done well because of it. We're talking a little bit about Lightfair having a cluster or community of healthcare design folks who can ask these questions and push. If we don't do this in community, you can only dream it in your crazy, so why should you ask, but in community, we find that, we can do it, and have certain numbers to demand. I mean, if I came to you and asked for something, and say, but Roger, you're the only one, I can't bring that idea to market. But if we were all to stand up and say, cycle lightning, wow, we're there. How do we get there faster? You've got some traction in that industry. So, the bad stuff comes out anyway. Everybody, and if you measure it and you put it out there, others will come to the rescue to help you. So.
And that's what we find too. I mean, a lot of these healthcare facilities, I know, we talk about lean a lot and really trying to improve processes and to improve. And there's no, because we see it from the case study perspective, where maybe a client had really bad lighting controls and wasted a lot of energy, and sometimes they're nervous to tell that story. But one thing is, you can never improve without really empirically assessing your baseline. So really doing the work to assess your baseline is so important, because that of itself, sometimes they don't realize this, shows you as being progressive. Because the person that's not progressive doesn't really care. This is the way that we've always done it. So really saying that, look, you're pioneering just by virtue of having the rigor to measure this. And then once you know your baseline, this is continuous improvement. You're going to definitely advance from there. So sometimes it's not, there's not a pass fail. It's this idea that they're committed to the process more than this is where they are today.
Yeah.
It's not a finger pointing thing. It's, really be rigorous about that and show yourself as a thought leader.
And the healthcare of yore had trouble with that before. That's not true anymore. I think that there's a whole lot more accountability.
Yeah, the Affordable Care Act forces them to be
Absolutely.
That's on the internet.
Absolutely. So we become trusted advisors. So EDAC certification, just a way to, it's a test. So yes, you have to study, but it's a great way, even if you don't take the test, to just sort of learn more about this process and how to own some of these topics if you're in healthcare, regardless of whether you're a landscape architect, an architect, an engineer, lighting designer, interior designer, furniture manufacturer, and all of us come to the table and come into this huge industry. So these are the sources. You can see at the end, assign each slide. You can, if you don't have access to, and some things you can Google and find online, but some you need access to our academic search journal. It's like a graduate student in your town or professor, they're available. You can get there, or call someone at the center and they'll help you. But any of these, right office has it, or how we pass them on. So as you can see, it's sort of a line idea, but this, orchestrated it for you. So thoughts, questions? Does this make sense?
I have a question. Actually, I have two. But when we think about healthcare, and we think about healthcare design, we think about patients, and we think about caregivers, and the facility and the staff. And then we also think about the families. But one question that I have, and maybe some of you can kind of share as well, what's the best way to get the feedback of the supportive family members? Because when we contemplate design, there are features like, I call it the exhale spaces, the exterior spaces, the well-designed cafeterias, those spaces where a family member who is stressed out, they've got their game face on, can sort of get away and actually get that recharge so that they can be supportive again. How do you get that feedback into the process? Because I think, I think that's some of the richest feedback.
There are groups who are so focused on that. I mean, Plaintree is probably one of the first organizations to take the voice of the family member and the patient. But there have been others, Pat Zadanko, who recently passed away, but in Georgia, with Bev Johnson at the Institute of Family and Patient-Centered Care. Not only Bigger Institute in Boston, not only talk about it, but give you tools on how to conduct interviews with these populations. So if you recall in that Project Wisdom diagram that I had, the constituency, it's not just the nurses on the intensive care unit or the docs who are performing surgery, or the volunteers who are there. There are ways to go out and speak to patients. There are plenty of groups within certain disease sectors, so there are support groups, so you have access to them. There are parents groups for children, flyers, they'll teach you. And some of the best stories that I tell will come from those encounters. We had an architect did in our program for a cancer hospital at Yale, and this architect, we did process of building this big building with large waiting rooms, and he said, I don't know, he said, I have to walk from space to space to space in the old building. The waiting rooms are smaller. And he said, my wife is incredibly supportive, but when I walk in that waiting room and I sit down to another patient and I have a conversation, they get what I'm going through. Although my wife wants to, she doesn't get it. He says, that's when the healing begins, is when I start having these conversations. So when you build those big rooms, you make sure you have a conversation starter in that room. And I thought, that's brilliant. But you can't get there all by yourself. You need these. And, there's a whole host, I bet you all have those, where it like pulled at your heartstrings and sort of took you to another way of thinking. You need to hear that. And then you need to tie, so it's like, so what do you do with that information? So art then plays a role because of the work that Roger Ulrich did. So you tie it to that, and then you begin to talk about how length of stay will shorten, how pain medications will, you might even get in this day and age, conversation about compliance. What do you do to make patients more compliant so they're not re-hospitalized? Because hospitals are going to get paid when patients are re-hospitalized. So, what do you do to help them listen through the conversation? What cues can we put in the environment? I mean, someone's got to handle the culture piece of it. You've got to script it, you've got to have medical, procedures and organizational operations in place, but we are equally in that conversation because the environment empowers and enables. And you have to understand how you click into that conversation in a meaningful way that you can take it to the boardroom and not let it be, booed out because it costs money. So, other thoughts on that topic? Other questions?
This is not a shy
This is New York City.
I don't believe it's a shy group. This is a dangerous group. I'm watching out for them.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.